Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? So? Okay. Well, good evening. My name is Mark Schneider. I'm the Santa Maria Police Chief, and I just want to welcome everybody here to tonight's discussion. And before I turn it over to Dr. McDuffie, I just wanted to thank our community service unit at the Santa Maria Police Department. They partnered with the Santa Maria Bonita School District to bring this discussion together tonight. And I want to also thank Allen Hancock College and Dr. Kevin Walters for allowing us to use this facility and venue. And I look forward to tonight and hearing some of the discussions from our law enforcement partners. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McDuffie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Snyder. Appreciate that. Welcome, everyone. I'm Darren McDuffie. I am the superintendent for the Santa Maria Bonita School District. And before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge some folks in the room. First, we have our mayor of Santa Maria, Miss Alex Patino. We have our city council member, Carlos Escobedo. Welcome. We also have Edwin Weaver, Executive Director of Fighting Back Santa Maria. And LaWanda Lyons Pruitt, NAACP President right there. We also have staff here from Santa Maria Bonita right over in that direction. First, Ms. Maiju Lo Chung Vu, our Assistant Superintendent for Santa Maria Ed Services. We also have Matt Beecher, our Deputy Superintendent for Santa Maria Bonita. And we have Brian Zimmerman. Dr. Brian Zimmerman is our Director of Student and Family Services in Santa Maria Bonita. And then do we have Steve Molina here? Steve Molina from the Santa Maria High School District, Director of Student Services. Welcome. So before I bring up our speakers, first of all, it is with a heavy yet hopeful heart that I stand before you today as hosting this crucial event, Pills That Kill. The scourge of fentanyl has cast a dark shadow over our communities, claiming lives and leaving devastation in its wake. But today we gather not in despair, but in determination. Today, we come together to shine a light on this epidemic, to raise awareness and to ignite change. We're joined by esteemed speakers and experts who bring invaluable insights and experiences to the table: law enforcement, healthcare professionals, community advocates, someone who has felt the crushing impact of fentanyl firsthand. Each voice you hear today is a beacon of hope in our fight against this insidious threat. Now, as we embark on this journey of awareness and education, let us be guided by empathy, compassion, and a shared commitment in saving lives. Let us amplify our voices, mobilize our resources, and stand in solidarity against the tide of addiction and death. Together, we can turn the tide of fentanyl, reclaiming our communities and our futures from the clutches of this deadly drug. The road ahead may be long, but with our collective resolve, I'm confident that we can overcome. One of our beliefs in Santa Maria Bonita School District is a unified community inspires faith and hope. And that is what we want to do here today as a unified community. Thank you all for joining us in this critical endeavor. And together, let us be the change we wish to see in the world. So with that, I'm going to bring up our first speaker from the Santa Barbara County Behavioral Wellness, Melissa Wilkins. She is the branch chief of alcohol and drug programs with the Santa Barbara Department of Behavioral Wellness. Melissa has worked for the County of Santa Barbara for nearly 10 years, and prior to that, worked with local community-based organizations. Melissa has her Master of Public Health and is certified both as a prevention specialist and alcohol and drug counselor. She is also the mother to 2 adolescent boys, bless your heart, and is dedicated to promoting safety and wellness in our community. Now, what I'd like to say for the speakers is to make sure that you speak, not to speak too quickly, as we have our interpreters here to interpret for our families. And we also have this as a YouTube, so we will be broadcasting this as well later on. So thank you. Melissa Wilkins.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate those introductory words, and I appreciate all of you for taking the time to be here. I just want to start by echoing and acknowledging that this is a really difficult topic to talk about, and I want to acknowledge that there's likely many people here today who've been impacted by the opioid epidemic in some way or another. So thank you for taking the time to be here, and I appreciate all of us working together to tackle this issue. Is there a trick?
I'm stalling until our
Okay.
IT person gets here.
While you're doing that, really quickly in the room, it looks like we have a really great mix of people here. I'm gonna say we have parents in the room. Are there parents in the room? Great. And we have students in the room of all ages, yeah? All right. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you got to see some of the resource tables as you were coming in. Thank you. And I think people will be hanging around afterwards too if you want to stop by on your way out. But I've been tasked today to talk about a whole slew of different things. So I'm going to start with just talking about what opioids are. The reason I start with what are opioids is because I don't ever want to assume that people know the difference between opioids and maybe some of the other substances that are out there. So opioids are a class of drugs that includes heroin and synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, which is what we'll talk a lot about today. But it also includes other pain relievers such as hydrocodone, Vicodin, Percocet, OxyContin. Those are ones you're probably more familiar with and have heard in your household. The truth is these opioids have been prescribed for decades, particularly since the 1990s. There's really interesting documentaries out there. If you're interested in learning more about the history of how we got to the place we're in today. But opioids in and of themselves are used to treat pain. What's come about recently is an influx of fentanyl, and fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It's similar to morphine, but it's actually 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. Like morphine, it was originally used to treat pain. It was used in medical settings, and it was used particularly for patients who had become tolerant to other opioids. So maybe they weren't responding anymore, or their pain was so severe they needed a higher dosage of treatment. What changed is that in 2006, fentanyl started being produced illicitly. And that's when we started to see it work itself into other drugs in the illicit market. So since 2006, we've come, unfortunately, a long way to the point where now fentanyl is the most common drug that's involved in overdose deaths. And so here you have what's a graph from 2017 to 2022, so it's over 5 years of data. This is local data from Santa Barbara County. And the reason that I show this is because you can see here the red is the number of deaths associated with fentanyl, well, with opioids, and the orange is fentanyl. So you can see that the fentanyl-related overdose deaths have steadily increased. In 2017, there were only 12 countywide, and since then, the number has continued to increase. So the worst of the years that we've had to date was 2022, where we had 115 overdose deaths due to fentanyl-related overdoses, and then 121 of those due to opioids. At the same time, nationally, you saw a lot of attention being given to opioids and how to address the opioid epidemic, because suddenly opioid overdose deaths were becoming the most significant factor in deaths or preventable deaths among young people. And so it was even exceeding car crashes and other deaths that used to be the ones that were most commonly talked about. So in 2023, we saw a little, what I consider a glimmer of good news, that the fentanyl-related overdose deaths is slightly decreased to 112. So I attribute that to a lot of the good work that we're doing, because the reality is that fentanyl is becoming more and more common in our communities. So the fact that we are able to address it through a variety of different ways is good. But clearly there's still a lot of work to be done, because we don't want to be losing anybody. So fentanyl, when prescribed by a doctor, I show these pictures because I think it's important to know what it looks like in a medical setting. It can come in the form of a transdermal patch or an injectable solution like you see here, or in a lozenge type form. The reality is that this is not the type of fentanyl that we're seeing out in the community. So what we see out in the community is the illicit fentanyl. And illicit fentanyl comes in many different shapes and forms. The most concerning is that it can be made to look like any other type of pill. And so for those of you who are students out here in the room, if you attempt to buy a pill, get a pill from anyone else, you might think it looks like Xanax, or these are M30s that might be made to look like OxyContin. But the reality is you don't know what's in that particular pill, because lots of times the fentanyl is made to look like these other pills. It's also comes in the form of just a straight pure powder. So it's really easy to mix in with other substances. Initially, when fentanyl was starting to kind of become more of an issue in Santa Barbara County, we heard that it was being mixed into substances like methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, but now it's even being mixed into marijuana. And so we've had multiple cases where kids as young as junior high are buying what they think is a joint, but unfortunately there's fentanyl laced into the joint. We've even had incidences on school campuses where powder is being mixed in with water and being sold as vodka in a water bottle on campus. So the reality is, and what I tell my kids, is you don't know what you're getting. If you're getting any sort of substance from anyone, you don't know what's in it, and you don't know how much of it could be fentanyl versus something else. So keep in mind that fentanyl, because it's made illicitly, it's really cheap to manufacture. So it makes sense that people who are selling drugs are mixing it into whatever they can because it's cheaper. There's more of a profit margin, right? But because there's no sort of way to regulate that, because it's not legal, if you were to buy a pill that looks like Xanax or OxyContin, and you split it in half, and maybe you take half and your friend takes the other half, you don't know even how much fentanyl could be in half of the pill versus the other half. And so that's the other thing that is concerning, is that because the potency can vary even within one pill, you might be using with a friend and you might be okay, your friend may not be okay. And it's those types of issues that lead to the significant number of overdose deaths that we're seeing. A couple of years ago, there was a huge spike in overdose deaths among young people due to fentanyl. And we have seen that come down a little bit. And as you can see here in this graph, the highest number of overdose deaths are actually ages like 30 to 40. So again, many of those overdose deaths are deaths that are not just opioid related, but maybe include fentanyl as well as other substances. Okay, so that's the depressing part of the presentation. What we want to do is really raise awareness around not only what is fentanyl, but how do you know if maybe someone that is in your family, a friend, someone you care about might have a problem with fentanyl or with other substances. And so there's some things that I'm going to talk about that are really particular to opioid use disorders or misusing opioids. And then some of these are actually really common for other issues that people might have going on. So the ones that are very specific to misusing opioids include fatigue or drowsiness, but I'm not talking about if you stayed up late studying for a test and didn't get enough sleep. I'm talking about if you're actually nodding off. That can be an indicator that you're currently under the influence of opioids. So if you're speaking to someone and they suddenly start to fall asleep in front of you, they're becoming not responsive, that can be an indicator that they're under the influence of opioids. Another one is a pinpoint pupils. That's specific to opioids as well. If you've seen it, you know exactly what it looks like, but it's when an individual's pupils are very, very constricted and they're not impacted by light in the room. That's another indicator that they could be currently under the influence of opioids. There's other health issues associated with opioids, such as being constipated or experiencing nausea. That's because opioids really affect your digestive tract. And then other things that are not necessarily specific to opioids, but might be associated with a bunch of different things, but things to be aware of include changes in sleep patterns or deterioration of someone's personal hygiene or rapid weight loss. So again, those ones you kind of have to take with a grain of salt, but the reason we talk about it is because we want you to know kind of the important things to be on the lookout for, particularly with people that you care about. And so those are some of the physical signs, but then there's also common social signs to consider. And this is really important just to, again, take with a grain of salt and know that these can be indicators of a lot of things, right? So these could be indicators that someone's experiencing mental health conditions, anxiety, depression. So we don't want to always just jump to, oh, they're using opioids. But the most important thing to consider is what is the baseline for that particular person. So if it's your best friend and they've always been very outgoing, they've been involved in sports, they love school, and then suddenly they're isolating from their family, they're isolating from friends, they're skipping school, they're no longer engaged in sports, that's a behavioral change, right? And so on the other hand, if you have someone who enjoys being alone, and loves reading in their room, then maybe that's not concerning that they're isolating themselves. So really the important thing to know is if you're seeing a really significant change in that person's behavior, that can be an indicator that something's going on. All right, so if you notice these things, what do you do? So the most important first step is to have the conversation. And that's actually one of the campaigns that we have really worked on over the last 2 years is getting messaging out to the community about the importance of having the conversation. So whether that's having a conversation with your friend, having a conversation with your child, with your parent, it's opening up that dialogue and asking what's going on. I'm noticing that there's some things that are different. Is something happening that you would like to talk about? And for parents in the room, I would say it's having even more direct conversations around that and having conversations around the risks associated with fentanyl. For students in the room, I would say you all are here. You have the opportunity to lead by example. So you can have those conversations with your friends, talk to your friends about the dangers associated with taking a pill that they don't know where it came from. And to be clear, any pill that they didn't get directly from their doctor is potentially an illicit substance. And then these are just other kind of talking points that you can incorporate into those conversations. So fentanyl can be found in anything, which I've already said. And then the other piece of it is that fentanyl can lead to a fatal overdose after just one time using it. That's the other reason it's such a risky substance. Back in the day, marijuana, if you experimented with marijuana, and I say back in the day because now even marijuana is being laced with fentanyl, but you didn't necessarily have the risk of overdosing and dying the first time you used marijuana. And that's the difference between the substances, fentanyl, and what's in these pills in comparison to experimenting with other things. The other thing is that fentanyl is incredibly addictive. And if you know of anyone who's used fentanyl or has used opioids regularly, you know that they are very addictive and they're addictive quickly. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But these are the types of things that you want to be able to talk about and talk about with the people that you care about. The hopeful part is that there are resources. And so there's a ton of different resources. I'm really thankful to have our community providers out in the forum out there. So if you're here seeking resources, whether that's for yourself or someone else, we have different providers that you can talk to. So I encourage you to do that afterwards. And with that, we want you all to know, okay, so you may be thinking, oh, I do know someone who has struggled with substance use or who's currently experimenting with taking pills. What do I do and what should I be on the lookout for? So what we want you to know is that there's certain behaviors that you can also keep an eye out for that are particularly risky for someone overdosing. And the reason, again, that I talk about this is because I think all parents should know this. And you as friends need to know this too, right? So if you know that your friend's using substances, know that it's particularly risky if they're using substances alone. That should be a red flag to you. And then if they're mixing substances, so if they're mixing opioids with alcohol or other substances like benzodiazepines, which could be Xanax, those are depressants, right? So if you're using an opioid and then you're using another depressant, that can potentially lower your rate of breathing even further, which puts you at more of a risk of overdose. The other thing that we've seen the biggest increase lately is overdose deaths mixed with fentanyl and stimulants. So that's unfortunately been a huge increase over the last 2 years that we've seen locally in Santa Barbara County. The other really risky time frame to be aware of is for individuals who have just completed either a treatment episode or they've just come out of incarceration. And the reason I say that is because if they're coming out of incarceration, they may have had a period where they weren't using while they were incarcerated. If they're coming out of a treatment program, residential treatment in particular, they've also likely had a period where they weren't using substances. And so they're coming back from those other places, they're coming back into their community, right? So they're coming back into their home situation, they're coming back into their social situation, and they're surrounded with the influences that they had previously. And if they use again after having that period of not using, they're less tolerant. And if they're using at the same level that they were using previously, they can very quickly overdose. So these are really risky times where we really work as a community and where we need to really provide that additional support to individuals as they're transitioning back into their home, back into their social setting, back into their schools after coming out of some sort of other treatment or incarceration. So what we want to do, first and foremost, is keep people alive. With the deaths and the increase in deaths that we've seen over the last couple of years, we've worked really closely with the community to put in a number of different resources to first keep people alive. And that doesn't solve the issue. That's really just kind of putting a Band-Aid on it, right? But out there, you're going to see resources. I believe Aegis Treatment Centers is here. They're providing a bunch of different resources. There's fentanyl test kits. These are intended for people who are currently using substances who want to make sure fentanyl is not laced into the substance. This, again, it's not a solution, but it's one of the strategies that we use to keep people alive. The next strategy is really addressing overdose prevention, and that's by getting Narcan out as widely as possible to the community. We've worked really closely with all of the school districts over the last few years to make sure that the secondary schools all have policies and procedures in place. The secondary schools have Narcan on campus, which is awesome. At the county, we have rolled out, I think I have a slide on it, but a program where anyone in the county of Santa Barbara can request Narcan for free through the mail. No questions asked, and it will get mailed directly to your house. The reason I bring this up is because Narcan is an incredible medication, I guess is the word, that can be used to reverse an overdose. So this is another way to keep people alive. It's not a solution, but it can keep people alive. So if you have individuals who are engaging those risky behaviors, who are using pills, who are taking opioids, it's important to have Narcan on hand and know what an overdose looks like. So an overdose happens when opioids suppress breathing, and so oxygen is not reaching your organs. It can happen anywhere from 20 minutes after using to 2 hours. I always say that because I think it's important if you have a loved one who you're sitting with and then suddenly they're experiencing signs of overdose and you're thinking, I've been sitting with them for the last hour. There's no other way they used. They may have used before coming home or before going to class. So that's just important to be aware of. So signs and symptoms of an overdose is if the face is feeling clammy, if it's lost color. So remember, overdose happens when your breathing's suppressed and oxygen isn't reaching different parts of your body. So the fingertips may start to turn blue, lips are turning blue, and the person becomes non-responsive. So if they're under the influence of opioids and you say their name, they might open their eyes and respond to you. That means they're not overdosing necessarily. But if they become unresponsive, then that's problematic. So first you would start by saying their name, and then you start by seeing if they respond to what's called external stimuli. So that means patting them, doing a sternum rub, which really means just rubbing their chest, is to see if they wake up and respond. If they're not breathing, or if there's a deep snoring or gurgling sound, or if the heartbeat is stopped, those are all indicators of overdose. So the first thing that you want to do is call 911. And there's actually new laws that just went into place that protects all Good Samaritans. So community members who call 911, who administer Narcan, you are protected under a series of new laws that were just passed in the state of California. So please call 911. And that's first and foremost, because Narcan is a temporary anecdote, if you will, but again, it's not going to cure the problem. And even after administering it, the person can start to overdose a second time. So call 911. And then this is, again, emphasizing, call 911. Very important. And then you're going to want to administer the Narcan. And so Narcan is, it doesn't do anything to you if the person's not under the influence of opioids, which is pretty awesome. It's not shown to have any negative side effects. But if the person is under the influence, what you do is it's like allergy medication. So it has, you can push this red button here, but you insert it up the nostril, push the red button once it's inserted up the nostril, and that administers 1 dose of Narcan. The individual should wake up within 1 to 2 minutes, 5 at the most. I don't recommend waiting 5 minutes. If you're not seeing the person respond after 1 to 2 minutes, then you should administer a second dose to the opposite nostril. The reality is that with fentanyl, what we are hearing and what studies are indicating is that it's taking more than one dose to revive the person after using fentanyl. And again, that's going back to the potency of fentanyl and the reality that some fentanyl or some pills are more potent than others with fentanyl. So administer 2 doses, and remember you should have the paramedics on the way. The paramedics have more Narcan on their emergency vehicles, and they can administer additional Narcan when they arrive on the scene. So even again, if the person's not responsive, you are potentially keeping them alive until the paramedics arrive. What Narcan does do is it puts the person in immediate withdrawal. So I think that's important for you to know, because when the person does wake back up, they might be mad at you because the last thing they remember is feeling good and going to sleep. And now here they are experiencing intensive withdrawal. So what you then want to do is make sure that you're providing comfort and support, letting them know that emergency personnel are on their way, and making sure that they're not going to use again, because that's the other natural instinct, right? Is if they wake back up, they're pissed off, sorry, they're in withdrawal, they're angry, and they want to use again to curb those withdrawal symptoms. So provide them support and just know that they may be upset when they come to. So with that, this is our Naloxone Now SB program. Please check it out online. If you don't have Narcan in your household, I recommend having it. I carry it in my purse. I would recommend having it in all of your first aid kits because you don't know when you may end up needing it. So please take advantage of this opportunity. There's also a number of other organizations, including the Sheriff's Department, that are distributing Narcan free of charge, emergency departments, and a lot of, I believe Alan Hancock is working on making Narcan available on campus as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get Narcan. There's some out in the foray out there tonight as well. So again, this is intended to keep people alive. And then beyond that, we want to actually provide long-term treatment and support. So as we transition into how to best provide treatment and support, I love this particular slide, and I know it's probably hard to see for those of you that are in the back, because this shows what the changes occur in the brain after using illicit substances. So here you can see the bottom blue line is the dopamine level. And so dopamine is like the happy substance in our brains, right? So dopamine is what makes you feel happy on a day-to-day basis. The blue line is a normal functioning brain. I put normal in air quotes because none of us are normal, but the average brain has, variants of dopamine levels throughout the day and from day to day. So your best day ever, best day ever, graduate from high school, get into the college of your dreams, whatever that may be, you're gonna be at a peak of like 100, right? And then your really sad days, you might be at about a 50. So that's kind of the normal variance. The orange shows the dopamine levels associated with using illicit substances, and this is particularly to opioids. So you can see here that first use spikes your dopamine level up to about 700. That's a huge difference from the normal functioning brain. And when you hear people saying like that they're chasing that first high, this is often what it's referring to, right? It's that first experience of that peak dopamine level. The problem with that is that you can see the second time that an individual uses, they're not reaching that same high again. They're much lower than that 700 and then progressively lower after that. what ends up happening is your brain isn't able to continue manufacturing the amount of dopamine that was released that first time, and it can't keep up with the production of dopamine, even if you're using more and more substances to try and achieve that feeling. So now, this is after only 20 days of use. It's 3 weeks. It's not long. Suddenly, the dopamine level is below that of the normal functioning brain. And so when I say that people are quickly addicted, this is why. And people who are coming to us for treatment services are often feeling really miserable. And they're feeling miserable because they are now having to use daily just to try and keep up with like not even that low level functioning of the dopamine levels. So the reason I talk about this is because it's really important for all of us to know if we have family or friends who are struggling with misusing substances, and particularly with the potency of fentanyl, that they're coming to us seeking help, and they've naturally depleted a bunch of these chemicals in their brain, and it makes it very, very difficult for them to just stop using. And as much as we would love to say that they should just stop, this is just talking about one impact that opioids have on the functioning of the brain. And I'm not a neuroscientist, so I am not doing it justice. But this doesn't include the other physical withdrawal symptoms that are experienced by individuals when they try and stop using opioids. What this means is that individuals are most successful with getting help when they use medications to help address some of these physiological issues, at least when they first try and stop using. And so for individuals who are going into treatment settings or trying to stop using, one of the strategies that we utilize is medications for addiction treatment. So we have a number of resources available to you. Some of our providers are out in the hall. We have Good Samaritan with a table out there. We have Aegis Treatment Centers with a table out there. Those treatment providers provide a mix of both behavioral treatment services as well as medications for addiction treatment. So they're addressing not only the physiological issues, but then also some of the behavioral pieces that go along with that. And the reality is that a lot of people succeed. So that's the good news. This is a horrible substance. It's a horribly difficult topic to talk about. But we have a lot of individuals who've come out on the other side who are living examples of what recovery looks like. And that's the hopeful piece. And that's the piece that I do want to leave you with as we continue on. So again, medications are really helpful for supporting the recovery process. They don't have to be used forever. In fact, doctors work with each individual to make sure that they're getting the right dosage. We've seen young people, I think the young people they're so much more resilient, right, in their recovery. And so young people can maybe use medications for a short period of time before working with their doctors to get off of them. And the reason I say that is because I know there's a lot of assumptions that if people start on medications, they have to use them for life, and that's not the case. So I would encourage you to talk with your treatment provider, talk with your doctor about those options, because there's a lot of different variants there. There's a ton of resources available on this topic. And one of the newest campaigns that we have through behavioral wellness is providing additional resources specifically for adolescents and for families. So this particular website, and it's overlaid there, sorry about that, but it's the oksbc.org. That's geared to adolescents to provide additional information and support around this. So that's all I've got. I will be out in the hall if you have questions afterward, and I want to thank you all for having me.
Thanks, Melissa. Give Melissa another hand. Thank you so much, Melissa. And it is so very important that we normalize these conversations. This is not going away just by us thinking, then hoping that it goes away. We need to have conversations with our family members, our children, and seek the help that they may need. Okay, I'm doing this, folks, without someone coming up. So our next presenter, Under Sheriff Craig Bonner, was selected as the Under Sheriff in August of 2022. He is the second in command at the sheriff's office and is largely responsible for the day-to-day operations of the organization. He directly represents the sheriff when called upon to do so. Under Sheriff Bonner has served the Santa Barbara County community for 29 years within a variety of law enforcement and correction capacities in the sheriff's office. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice Management and is a graduate of the 14th Post Command College program, as well as the California Police Chiefs Association Drucker Executive Leadership Institute. Craig grew up in Santa Barbara County, chooses to raise his family here, and is very passionate about ensuring the sheriff's office continues providing the best possible public safety services to our community members. Please welcome from Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office, Under Sheriff Craig Bonner.
Well, good evening and welcome. This happens to be one of those instances where I am tasked with representing the sheriff. Unfortunately, Sheriff Brown is on his way back from Washington, D.C., which I'll get into a little bit because he was there advocating for additional services and resources to deal with the opioid epidemic. On behalf of our entire Sheriff's Office team, I want to thank each of you for being here tonight. By being here tonight, you're taking an active role in combating one of the biggest problems within our local community, a problem that is impacting all of us. Each and every one of us has some sort of a connection to somebody who was harmed by opioids and fentanyl in specific. It is impacting all walks of life. It is impacting all of our various communities within Santa Barbara County. And I'm going to get into some statistics for you that are going to show you where it is impacting, how it is impacting, but you're going to find that it is impacting everywhere. It is impacting everyone. Now I did it. So about 2020, maybe late 2019, we started paying attention to our overdose deaths. We've had variations over the years. Sometimes we would get a hot load of heroin that would come in and we'd see a little bit of a climb. And you see that in the prior years going back some time. There are ups and downs. But if you start looking at 2018, 19 on, it has done nothing but grow. And if you look at 2022, 164, 2023, 228. There is no indication that these numbers are going down. And that was a red flag that we started seeing ramping up around 2020. So how bad is it? Over the past 2 years, the number of overdose deaths has far exceeded the combined number of all other unnatural deaths in Santa Barbara County. That's all the homicides, it's all the suicides, and it's all the traffic deaths combined. And the overdose deaths have exceeded it. Another way of looking at it, in 1990, Alaska Airlines Flight 261 crashed into the ocean just off the Channel Islands, about 20 miles offshore. 88 men, women, and children were lost that day. An absolute tragedy. But over the past 2 years, we have had the equivalent of 2 of these airplane crashes happen in our county each year, just from overdose deaths. We're losing our community's men, women, and children. They are our family members, our sons, our daughters, and our parents. This crisis is impacting all of us, all walks of life. So then, as we started looking at, hey, we've got a problem here, the number of overdose deaths are increasing. Our sheriff's office team, the coroner's unit, got together and we started working on trying to track it, trying to break it down. What is changing? What has changed where we were doing our normal roller coaster to now we're moving up, up, and up? And so more recently, we've teamed up with the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department, and we're working to better track the overdose deaths. And tonight, what I'm going to show you is a number of slides that are coming from a detailed report that our combined agencies have put together. If you are interested in seeing the larger full report, it will be available via the Board of Supervisors agenda for next week. The sheriff will be there doing another presentation that will go into even more detail than I'm going to do here tonight. I'm going to try to keep it a little shorter for you. So this is similar to what a slide you saw previously. This is the age groups of the overdose deaths over the past 3 years. Again, as was mentioned, the number of overdose deaths in younger folks has declined. However, I caution everybody, just because the number of younger folks has declined, we just had a 16-year-old overdose on fentanyl and die a couple weeks ago. You can't take for granted that because it's declining, we don't have to worry about this or our business is done. It is still a problem out in our communities. People are still dying every week. Week in, week out, we're seeing 3 to 4, and sometimes it has spiked as high as 6 or 7 per week that we're losing in our community. So that's the overall overdose deaths, the numbers I gave you. I'm going to break it down to fentanyl, because here's what we realized. We realized that if we looked at the previous numbers, and if you were to run those numbers that are going anywhere from, let's say, 50-ish up into moving into the 70s, if you add the additional number of overdose deaths, that's where we are now, is the addition of fentanyl into this mixture. So again, this is just updating the stats that were shared earlier. These are the overdose deaths. Yes, it did go down slightly this past year, but very slightly. However, you saw the overall number of overdose deaths in general went up because our methamphetamine overdose went up. So although the number of fentanyl went down by a couple, the overdose numbers went back up. So this is breaking it down by gender, male and female. Yes, most fentanyl overdose deaths are male, and that's true of overdose in general, but it does affect females also. So this is showing the race of individuals that have passed away from fentanyl overdose. It is disproportionately affecting Caucasian. However, Hispanics are very hard hit. And again, the one thing I'll say is it hits all walks of life, all communities. Just because it shows one thing doesn't mean that the community, your community or your family can't be impacted by it. Okay, this is the fentanyl overdose deaths by age group. The other one was overdose deaths in general. And again, you see that the number of younger folks has declined in the last year. But again, is that something that you want to count on as being a realistic way of we're okay? And the answer is no. South County versus North County. North County actually had more fentanyl in 2021 and 2022. In 2023, that reversed. The greatest growth we saw was in Santa Barbara City and the Goleta area. The Lompoc Valley saw a decline last year. But again, is that going to change this year? Sorry, this is the one that shows the actual cities. So South Coast, Lompoc, again, you see Lompoc is the yellow. It's in the one that has declined, and then Santa Maria Valley is in the gray, and that has pretty well stayed true. This slide is just showing whether or not a person is housed or unhoused. And there has been growth in the unhoused, but all walks of life. It really doesn't matter whether you're rich, you're poor, you're housed, you're unhoused. It is impacting all walks of life. They even looked at it in terms of, are we seeing more overdose in a particular month? And each year we do see more overdoses in a particular month, but year by year, it has changed every year. So again, is there a particular time? A particular time is every time. So what can we do about it? And obviously we talked about a number of ways of protecting ourselves, educating, harm reduction in the previous one. Project Opioid, Santa Barbara County, is a collaborative effort which brings together leaders from various sectors to address the increasing overdose deaths. It is a multidisciplinary approach, and the Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Brown has taken a lead role in the organization coordinating these efforts. Some of the examples of that, and it was mentioned, Narcan distribution. All of our deputies carry Narcan, but now, more recently, you can go to any sheriff station, no questions asked, and ask for and receive a box of Narcan to take home. Trying to make it as easy as possible to provide that life-saving resource to members of the community. We've even made the Narcan available within jail facility, both to our deputies and to the inmates. We have created safe boxes where anybody coming into the jail can, no questions asked, get rid of any drugs that they possess. And yet we are still seeing overdoses and deaths in our jail from fentanyl. We have the Sheriff's Treatment Program and medication-assisted treatment, which was also mentioned slightly, all of which is for that jail facility. And then national advocacy efforts. Sheriff Brown is coming back from Washington, D.C. right now. And again, he is using his role as the president of the Major County Sheriffs of America, as a past president of the California State Sheriffs Association, leveraging all opportunities to collaborate with other sheriffs and government leaders to address the fentanyl epidemic, advocating for both policy changes and additional resources to support local efforts. And there are needs for additional resources. It's important that our communities have a balanced, full spectrum approach to combating the opioid epidemic, providing education, treatment, harm reduction, and deterrence. Deterrence for those who would distribute this poison within our communities. We've made significant strides as it relates to education, treatment, and harm reduction. But as it relates to deterrence, we have slipped backwards. At one point in time, there were five full-time investigative units that focused on getting the dangerous drugs out of Santa Barbara County. There are now only two. Put simply, it is way too easy to obtain dangerous drugs in our community. And this needs to change. Our county and city policymakers, leaders need to provide our local law enforcement agencies and our communities with additional resources to mitigate the flow of dangerous drugs into our neighborhoods. And I believe now we're going to have somebody come up and talk from a family experience.
Please give another round of applause to Under Sheriff Craig Bonner. And we have been listening and seeing statistics and how this drug has impacted our county. But we have a face, a mother. Sarah Cherney, Sarah, come over. And Sarah Cherney lost her son, Mario Perez, February 22nd, 2022, to fentanyl. And just reading from the GoFundMe page, Mario was a loving son, a kind brother, a pure soul, and an amazing friend to everyone that was lucky enough to know him. A one-of-a-kind human with an energy that was unmatched. So please give your attention to Ms. Sarah Cherney.
This is the first time I've spoken about my son publicly, so I'm hoping to get through this. Thank you for being here and wanting to learn more about what this is doing to our families and our communities. I'm going to talk a little bit about my son Mario and his life. My son Mario Perez III was born on May 7th, 1993. Our birthdays were exactly 1 week apart. Mario was born a week before my 16th birthday. When I became pregnant with Mario, I was a selfish, rebellious, to say the least, teenager. My life was headed in a very dark direction. Mario brought me out of this darkness. I could no longer be selfish. I had a human I needed to live for, to focus on, to love. The first time I heard his heartbeat, I cried. Not from fear or sadness because I was pregnant at such a young age, but from joy, hope, a purity of love I had never felt. Mario was my miracle. My world today would look very different if Mario didn't come into my life at that moment. Mario was an exceptional baby. He hardly ever cried. He nursed well, slept well, almost as if he wanted to make it easy for me. He even started walking on his first birthday without a lot of help from any of us. This would be a common denominator throughout Mario's life. One of my favorite memories was when I was in college and we were living in family housing. He would race around the courtyard on his little bicycle. One day, while I was studying for upcoming finals, Mario's training wheels broke. I told him I would help him later after I was done. Mario was a very impatient kid. He didn't want to wait for me, so he proceeded to take off the training wheels and begin riding his bicycle. He taught himself how to ride a bike when he was barely 3 years old. Mario played all the sports growing up. Only once though. One season of football, soccer, basketball, baseball, you name it. He was very athletic, but his heart was never in any of these. His true love was skateboarding. I think always moving around on the concrete really helped with his ADD. He found peace soaring through the air, and boy, did he soar. We would attend social city council meetings in Solving to help get the skate park built. Until then, I would drive Mario and his friends to Lompoc or the Santa Maria Skate Park when it was at the YMCA after school and on the weekends. If Mario and I traveled anywhere, we would always visit the local skate park. He was extremely talented at skateboarding. I thought for sure he would become a professional skater and take care of me one day. But I believe that Mario's abuse of drugs and alcohol hindered this. Mario's substance abuse began in high school. We didn't even know if he's going to graduate until the day of his graduation. It came down to one final, one grade. He did end up graduating. He always had a way of pulling through and making things happen for himself. At this point, I believed his problem was with alcohol and drugs, marijuana, which was an illegal drug at that time. But Mario was persistent and always did things on his own. When he moved out, when he was 18, he got his medical marijuana prescription. At this point, he was on his own. He was going to City College. He had a love for the outdoors. He was studying horticulture. The next year, he was arrested for having heroin in his possession. He told me he was holding it for a friend, and I believed him. I never thought he was abusing heroin. The only knowledge I had of a heroin addiction was what I saw in movies and on TV. I never experienced it firsthand. Mario was not like that. I thought his problems were with other things. Regardless of believing if he was a heroin user or not, I sent him to rehab shortly after. Mario walked out a week later. He did try and stay sober on and off throughout his 20s. He would have long stretches of sobriety. He would attend 12-step meetings and had sponsors. He had over 1 year sober on his 21st birthday. This happened on and off. I never thought it was that bad. Mario always had a job. He maintained them, same job for many years. He took care of his responsibilities meticulously almost. He would go to his regular doctor checkups, dentists. He would pay his bills on time. He hated having debt, got changes on his oil changes on his car. He's not what you would think an addict looked like. He was highly functional. He would travel, driving cross country by himself or with friends, going to skate parks and concerts. He loved the outdoors. He would drive his truck to Fig Mountain and camp. He loved music. He'd go to any concert he could. He would tell me my taste in music sucked, and he would always he would send me new songs, music videos. He was written when his favorite bands, Pagan Altar, wrote a memorial for him after his passing because he was somewhat a historian of that band. He loved animals. He was a very reliable pet and house sitter. He was kind, compassionate. He was highly spiritual. Mario participated in talking circles and sweats at the Chumash Reservation. He studied Buddhism, Christianity, metaphysics, paganism, and even the dark arts. He was always searching and curious of the unseen. Mario was also a wonderful friend to so many people, from friends from his childhood, people of all ages, all walks of life. When his Nana passed, he would go spend time with her friend and roommate because he knew she was lonely. He had the most beautiful smile and contagious laugh. About a year before the COVID shutdown, Mario's Nana and best friend passed away. This was very hard on the family, especially Mario. A year later, in 2020, during COVID, my little sister, Mario's aunt, also passed away of an accidental overdose from the mixing of certain pills and alcohol. Mario and I spent less and less time together before and during this time around COVID. His behavior around the family was hard to deal with. I wish I would have seen the presentation before this. All the signs were there. Isolation from family and friends, stomach issues, sleep issues, anxiety, depression. Our relationship became estranged. In 2021, during COVID, Mario took care of a lot of health needs he needed to take care of. He got LASIK eye surgery and decided to have rotator cuff surgery from all the skateboarding accidents and dislocation of his shoulder. After this, he was taking Oxy. This, I feel, with his previous addiction to heroin, was when the severity of his addiction took hold. I do not personally believe or know of Mario being addicted to fentanyl, but I do know that he was addicted to other opioids. I don't really know what else to say about Mario's journey after this. He still remained highly functional, mostly. We would speak on the phone almost daily. He would at times tell me he was going through a hard time and was sick. I always thought this to be his colitis or depression and anxiety. He always made it seem like it was that. But what he was really trying to tell me was that he was sick from using drugs or withdrawing. Mario called me one day while he was visiting a friend in Los Angeles. He told me he needed help and would be checking himself into rehab. This was the first time Mario had ever asked for help. He realized he could no longer get sober on his own, and also realizing from the presentation earlier that he maybe had done fentanyl or just the severity of his opioid abuse was too much for him to handle any longer. When Mario got back home from LA, investigated several options, which facilities would be covered under his insurance. He went to the doctor to get a referral, everything he needed to do, and he did it all on his own. This is how desperate he was to get sober. The inpatient rehabilitation center he found that he was accepted under our insurance had a wait list. As a mother, I couldn't understand this. When someone is that desperate and in need, and they willingly decide that they need help, what if he did not make it the month or weeks before he could be admitted? But it was our only option. And Mario, as far as I know, stayed sober till he could be admitted. While he was waiting to enter the in-house rehabilitation center, he enrolled in Allen Hancock College. He was trying to get his life back together again. He debated whether he should start rehab because the start date of the semester was when he would be in the rehabilitation center. I told him his sobriety was more important. He could always re-enroll. Mario finally entered the when you stay there, the words slipping me now, Rehabilitation Center in Lompoc in January of 2022. It was only a 2-week stay, but he stayed until the end and finished. He was really happy when he got out. He got a job at a beautiful spiritual sanctuary that he had been attending since high school, off and on. He loved it. He was doing ranch work, digging trenches, but he was outside in nature in an extraordinary, beautiful place. Since high school, Mario was a dishwasher and prep cook and always wanted a new job outside. He had the possibility also of acquiring residence there on the property. About 2 or 3 weeks after Mario was home, I got a call from one of the owners of the sanctuary and his boss, who is also a family friend. Mario didn't show up for work, which was not like him at all, at his job or at that job or any job he ever had, even in his addiction. I told her I would try to get a hold of him. His phone went straight to voicemail. My stepdad, Mario's papa, was driving my other son, Sabian, to jiu-jitsu in Solvang. At that moment, I called him and asked him to drive by Mario's house. He drove by and Mario's car was in the driveway, so he dropped my son off and went back. He knocked on the door and there was no answer. I'm on the phone with him as this is happening. I asked him to try the side door. The side door was unlocked. I'm very grateful that Mario was in his home and he was found by a family member, as difficult as that is. It was my day off. I was at home folding laundry. It was about 4 p.m. I was supposed to take Mario bread that day, and I forgot. It was a Tuesday, 2/22/22. Mario was 28 years old. On my drive to Mario's house, I didn't really believe he was gone. I thought maybe he had drank too much and was passed out. I was still in my denial until the very end, because drug addiction did not look like my son. When the coroner called me with the autopsy results a few weeks later, he said he had 6 or 7 other calls to make on his desk, all of the result of fentanyl poisoning. But Mario was the only one that had 100% fentanyl in his system. All the other autopsies showed fentanyl mixed within another drug. I believe Mario is not a fentanyl user. I believe he thought he was taking oxy or heroin. I will never know for sure. I'll never know for sure. But what I do know is that if it wasn't for fentanyl, my son would still be alive. Fentanyl kills addicts and non-addicts. It does not discriminate. Since Mario's passing, there is a palpable feeling of emptiness, as if there is something that you could feel was here in this world and now it's not. It goes beyond grief. After Mario passed, I got tons and tons of messages from people I did not know, but Mario did, expressing to me how wonderful of a human being Mario was, the things that he had done for them, and how much they grieved his loss. the world lost a kind, loving, influential energy and force. He did so much for so many. We will cherish Mario's memory and life forever. Mario will always remain my miracle.
Thank you for sharing your story. So, as we draw to this poignant and crucial fentanyl awareness event to a close, I am overwhelmed with gratitude for the tremendous support and dedication shown by each and every one of you for being here. Your presence here today signifies a collective commitment to combating this harrowing grip of fentanyl in our communities. I'd like to thank Dr. Tammy Castillo-Schiffer, who's a multilingual director in the Santa Maria Bonita School District. She's right over here in the corner. For assisting in putting this together, her team of interpreters right over here, wave, the interpreters right here. Our IT folks right here, wave, thank you. I want to extend my deepest appreciation to Chief Mark Schneider of the Santa Maria Police Department. Chief Schneider, your unwavering leadership and tireless efforts in ensuring the safety and well-being of our Santa Maria community are truly commendable. Your presence here today underscores the importance of this collaborative effort in addressing this pressing issue. A heartfelt thank you to you, Melissa Wilkins, from the Santa Barbara County Behavioral Wellness. Your insights and expertise have shed light on this multifaceted challenge posed by fentanyl abuse and addiction, and your dedication to providing support and the resources for those in need is invaluable. Under Sheriff Craig Bonner from the Santa Barbara County Sheriff Office, your commitment in upholding the law and protecting our citizens is deeply appreciated. The work that you're doing with the opioid awareness through Project Opioid is much appreciated. And your presence today underscores the vital role law enforcement plays in combating this illicit distribution of fentanyl. And then to Sarah Cherney, Mario's mom. So your bravery is sharing your story. And sharing your story serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating impact that this opioid crisis has on individuals and families. Your advocacy and resilience inspires all of us to strive for change and support for those affected by this addiction. And I just want to thank you. So, thank you to Dr. Kevin Walters here, the superintendent president of Allen Hancock. I want to thank him for providing this venue for us here at Allen Hancock College and hosting this. And in closing, let us carry forward the knowledge and determination gained from today's discussions. Together, let us continue to raise awareness, provide support, and work tirelessly towards a future free from the grip of fentanyl addiction. So thank you all once again for your unwavering dedication and commitment. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I think there are folks at the table, the resources at the table, so please make sure you visit the tables